The hour was nearing midnight in the old Evans family farmhouse, and the wind howled like a wounded beast through the surrounding hills. I couldn't sleep, a heavy feeling of unease pressing down on me like a waking nightmare. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound coming from the dark cellar below. Not the usual creaking of wood, but a muffled whisper, as if someone was calling my name from afar, from a time long gone. I initially dismissed it, attributing it to my tired imagination. But the whispers returned, growing closer and more insistent, as if emanating from the very foundations of the house, from a buried past refusing to remain silent. Little did I know then that these whispers were merely the beginning of a series of events that would unveil a dark secret shrouding my family for generations. An ancient curse awakening from its slumber to claim what was its own. The Evans family farmhouse, as the scattered villagers around the hills knew it, stood solitary and imposing, yet it was always enveloped in an aura of caution and hushed whispers. My late grandfather had always warned us against going down to the old cellar beneath the house, which remained perpetually locked and unnaturally cold, even in the height of summer. Tales of strange sounds emanating from there echoed among the family during long nights by the fireplace. My father always dismissed these superstitions, but I would often catch a fleeting look of deep worry in his eyes whenever the cellar was mentioned. On that fateful night, I decided to ignore my grandfather's and father's warnings. Curiosity, as it so often does, was a tempting poison. I descended the narrow stone steps leading to the cellar, each footfall producing a muffled creak as if the very earth groaned beneath my weight. The air in the cellar was cold and thick with the scent of damp earth and old mildew. There was no natural light, only the flickering glow of a small candle I held, casting dancing, distorted shadows on the stone walls. I began to listen intently. The silence was heavy and unsettling, but every now and then, I would hear faint whispers, indistinct words echoing in the dark corners. I felt as though I wasn't alone down there, as if unseen eyes were watching me from the shadows. I started to explore, my hands brushing against the cold, moss-covered walls and examining the old, abandoned farming tools and dusty wooden crates. I came across a small box made of dark wood, secured with a rusted lock and adorned with strange carvings resembling intertwined serpents. The box was silent, yet a peculiar sense of dread washed over me the moment I saw it. The moment my eyes fell upon the box with the strange carvings, I felt a cold current run through my veins, and the whispers began to grow clearer and more disturbing. They were no longer just muffled sounds, but I started to hear fragments of words in Old English, a language I had never learned, yet it instilled in my heart a profound sense of fear and unease. The candle in my hand began to tremble violently, as if an unseen force was shaking it. Shadows flickered rapidly in the corners of the cellar, and when I turned, they vanished into the darkness. On one occasion, I distinctly heard a faint female voice weeping my deceased grandmother's name in a tone filled with sorrow and despair. I began to feel watched, as if an invisible presence surrounded me, feeding on my fear. I tried to go back upstairs, but the heavy stone door slammed shut with a resounding thud, as if an unseen latch had been bolted from the outside. I pushed against it with all my might, but it remained as immovable as part of the wall itself. Panic began to creep into my heart. I looked at the small box, an insistent and irrational urge compelling me to open it, as if the answer to all these events lay within. Faint markings began to appear on its surface, barely visible glowing lines forming strange and unsettling shapes. A lightheadedness washed over me, and I started started to hear other sounds intermingling with the whispers. The scraping of nails on stone, the rustling of old fabric, as if the cellar was replaying painful memories from the past. I began to question my sanity. Was I imagining all of this? But the cold that seeped into my bones and the feeling of a malevolent presence were undeniably real. The intensity of the sounds escalated abruptly, the whispers morphing into muffled screams echoing around me, as if tormented souls were trapped within the cellar walls. The candle in my hand nearly extinguished from a sudden gust of cold air that swept through the space, leaving me momentarily in a pitch-black darkness that amplified my terror. When the weak flame regained its strength, I saw something I couldn't comprehend. In the dark corner behind an old barrel, there appeared to be a shape moving slowly. It wasn't clearly defined, but rather resembled a dense shadow writhing and contracting. Yet it emanated an overwhelming sense of hatred and malice. I tried to stare at it, but my eyes couldn't focus. I began to hear a new sound added to the terrifying chorus, a heavy, ragged breathing, as if a large creature stood there watching me. Suddenly, I felt a cold touch on the back of my neck, as if icy fingers were brushing against my skin. I cried out involuntarily and leaped forward, away from the dark corner. I hadn't seen anything clearly, but the sensation of the cold touch was real and sickening. I began to feel the air in the cellar growing thicker, as if it was pressing down on my chest and preventing me from breathing. Fine cracks began to appear on the stone cellar walls, emitting faint, cracking sounds, as if the place itself was in agony. I looked at the small box and noticed that the glowing markings had become brighter, and it began to emit a faint humming or droning sound. I felt a powerful urge to open it, but at the same time, an inner voice screamed, warning me against it. Suddenly, the candle flickered violently and went out completely, plunging me into absolute darkness. I heard the sound of heavy footsteps slowly approaching me from the dark corner. I couldn't see anything, but I felt the presence of something large and very close to me, its heavy breath washing over my face with a foul, grave-like odor. Then I heard a rough voice whispering beside me, words in Old English that this time sounded like a curse directed straight at me. I froze in place with terror, unable to move or speak, awaiting the moment this unknown thing would pounce on me. In the pitch black, the rough whispers still echoing in my ears, I felt a paralyzing fear grip my limbs, but a primal part of my mind refused to surrender. I began to breathe slowly and deeply, trying to calm my racing heart. I couldn't see anything, but I tried to recall the layout of the cellar, the location of the door, anything that could help me escape. I realized the foolishness of coming down here alone, ignoring the age-old warnings. I began to feel around on the floor with my hands, searching for anything I could use as a weapon, a piece of wood, a metal tool, anything. My fingers brushed against a long wooden stick lying beside one of the barrels. It was rough and somewhat heavy, but better than nothing. I gripped it tightly, and a sliver of confidence returned. I started to move slowly and cautiously in the direction of the door I had come through, guided by the sound of my own breathing and my sense of touch. The sounds still surrounded me, but the rough whispers seemed to recede slightly. I began to wonder if this thing feared the light, or if my presence had angered it, causing it to retreat temporarily. As I moved, my foot bumped against something cold and solid on the floor. I bent down and cautiously felt it. It was an old book, a large volume bound in decaying leather. I felt a strange pull towards it, as if the book held a secret or an answer to what was happening. I initially ignored the urge to open it, survival being my top priority. But a powerful feeling began to take hold, that understanding what was happening was the only true way to survive. Perhaps this book contained the history of the family, or the reasons behind this curse. Maybe a way to break it was written within its ancient pages. I decided to pause and examine the book, for it might be the key to salvation or the cause of my ultimate demise. I felt the unseen force pulling me with greater intensity, and I nearly lost consciousness. But suddenly, and unexpectedly, the old book I had touched fell from my grasp and opened to a yellowed, brittle page. In the faint green light, I saw strange drawings and words written in faded ink. At the same instant, the distorted entity flinched and recoiled slightly, as if something in the book had harmed it. I mustered my remaining strength and crawled away from the entity, towards the crack in the door where the green light seeped in. With difficulty, I managed to push the door open and stumbled out of the cellar, leaving behind the darkness and the terrifying entity. I ascended the decaying stairs as fast as I could, a chilling dread still clinging to me. I reached the living room and slammed the cellar door shut, but I felt it wouldn't be enough. What I had seen downstairs, what I had felt, was too real. I looked at my hands and noticed I was still clutching the wooden stick tightly. But the book remained downstairs. I sat shivering beside the cold fireplace, listening to the wind still howling outside. But now, I began to hear other sounds, faint whispers coming from within the walls, from the upstairs, even from beyond the windows. They were no longer confined to the cellar. Had I escaped the curse, or had I brought it with me? Would the entity remain trapped below, or would it find another way to reach me? And what was written in that old book? Did it hold the secret of the curse or a way to break it? Unanswered questions echoed in my mind, leaving me in a state of constant fear and anxiety, wondering when the whispers of the dark past would return.